Greetings, everyone. My name is Bridget Cabrera, she, her, hers, and I'm the Executive Director of Methodist Federation for Social Action. MFSA is an over 100-year-old faith-based policy and organizing network. Our mission is to mobilize, lead, and sustain a justice-seeking United Methodist movement, energizing people to be agents of God's justice, peace, and reconciliation. And we're very excited to be co-hosting this series of webinars with our longtime partner, United Methodist for Kairos Response, UMKR. As we begin, we acknowledge this land and the many lands that you are joining us from, its history and all the being seen and unseen, known and unknown. And as we step into our work on this land, many of us as uninvited guests, we offer this work in the spirit of reparation, devoting ourselves to justice as we strive to uplift the legacy of this place and all the places that we are joining from. We invite you to acknowledge the indigenous land of where you are joining and type that in the chat. A few announcements concerning our call today. By participating in our webinars, we covenant together to co-create an equitable and brave space where we learn, engage, and grow in relationship together. We are recording this webinar, and that recording will be shared in the coming days. And as you have questions, please type them in the chat. You do not have to wait until a certain specific time to have your questions, so you don't have to worry about forgetting them. Just type them in the chat, and we will collect those and get them to our moderator. We do have closed captioning available. It is automatically generated, so do expect to see some spelling errors and such, as that is kind of how those things usually go. And now I am pleased to turn our conversation over to our moderator, Teresa Basile. Teresa is a co-founder of UMKR. She currently serves as Communications Director and Education Chair, works on a variety of programs for UMKR, such as movement building and political advocacy. She has served on the boards of Friends of Sabeel North America, FOSNA, and U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. And she has been an activist and organizer for many years in MFSA and in the Western Methodist Justice Movement. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Bridget. And welcome to everyone who's here. It's wonderful to see so many people who have joined us today for this very special event. And I realized earlier today it is a special day in another way for two of the world's major faith traditions. It is Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent for millions of Christians. And it is also either today or tomorrow the beginning of Ramadan for many millions of Muslims. And that means that in both our faith traditions, we're starting a season of fasting and reflection and devotion. And this is a particularly appropriate time for us to begin to reflect more deeply on what God calls us to do for justice and peace in the Holy Land. So we have a remarkable group of speakers with us today. It's the largest panel that we've ever had in our webinar series, which started back in 2020. And we're pleased and privileged that we have two of the leading voices for the Palestinian Christian community. And scheduled as part of our webinar, we are expecting 3 United Methodist bishops on 3 continents. And we have a co-chair of UMKR steering committee. Just to let you know what is coming up, after we have heard from each of our speakers individually, we will have a panel discussion. And hopefully, if time permits, we will have a Q&A time at the very end. And we're expecting this event to last 90 minutes. All of our speakers will be addressing the bold and urgent statement that Palestinian Christians issued in November 2025, known as Kairos Palestine II. The full title is A Moment of Truth, Faith in a Time of Genocide. And that title draws on the legacy of the first Kairos Palestine document in 2009. This new declaration presents more boldly than ever the reality for Palestinian Christians, for all Palestinians, the reality of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid in Palestine. The document challenges Western complicity and the lack of adequate response and action in the global church community. And the Palestinian Christians in this declaration are calling on all of us for costly solidarity. To help us understand what that means and the purpose of Kairos Palestine, to unfold the significance of the document, we're going to be hearing first from Rifat Kassis, who is the general coordinator of Kairos Palestine, as well as the coordinator of the worldwide movement, Global Kairos for Justice, which evolved from Kairos Palestine. He's a co-author of the Kairos Palestine Document. In 1991, Rifat founded the Palestine Office of Defense for Children International and became president of that international organization in 2005, serving 2 terms in that office. Also in the 1990s, Rifat established a program in Chechnya for children victimized by war. In 1995, he co-founded the Alternative Tourism Group in Palestine. In 2000, he became the executive director of the East Jerusalem YMCA. In 2005, Rifat joined the World Council of Churches to run the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel. And he is author and editor of numerous articles, papers, and books. Welcome, Rifat.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I thought you brought another speaker. So thank you for this nice introduction. Actually, tonight I'm going to speak about why Kairos Palestine II was written and what are some of its most important points. And I will leave to Reverend Monzer to speak about its asks and calls for the global church and for the international community. To understand why another Kairos document, we must first understand how profoundly the context has changed between 2009, when the first Palestine document was written, and the reality of the last 3 years. The earlier one emerged in a difficult period, but still within a broken yet functioning political framework. Today, the situation represents a historical rupture. In 2009 and before, the violence against us was cyclical and episodic. Gaza experienced wars every few years, and negotiations resumed in between. Violence was severe, but still framed by many actors as a conflict with limits, and the two-state solution was officially still alive. In the last years, the situation has shifted to a systematic, open-ended genocidal war with no clear endpoint. Gaza has experienced near total destruction, with thousands of killed and maimed people, mostly civilians and children. The West Bank is experiencing de facto and de jure annexation. Settler terrorism and collective punishment are on their peak. Jerusalem has become a closed and exclusive space for Israelis. Migration on our side increasingly becomes forced and irreversible. Staying is framed as resistance, while leaving becomes survival. The language itself has shifted from security needs towards extermination, ethnic cleansing, and re-engineering of space and demography. Earlier, there was still belief in international law, and UN mechanisms were taken seriously. Western governments maintained at least the fiction of neutrality. In the last 2 years, international law is openly ignored or selectively applied. Many Western states no longer pretend neutrality, and we saw this during the genocide war in Gaza. Institutions meant to protect civilians appear weak or complicit, and terms such as genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid have moved into mainstream discussion rather than remaining fringe accusations. Earlier, the central question was how to end the occupation, the apartheid, and implement the two-state solution. Today, the question has become whether Palestinians will remain on their land at all. The struggle now is about existence, narrative, memory, and continuity. Kairos Document 2 therefore emerged not simply as a new analysis, but as a confessional document, a statement of faith written in a moment when silence itself becomes a moral failure. Because of this, Kairos Document 2 is not an update, but a document of moral urgency, theological confrontation, and historical warning. We are warning the international community of what's going to happen to us. It asks not only what Palestinians suffer, but what faith demands when human destruction reaches catastrophic levels as we witness now. I will move now to highlight some of its important points. At its heart, Kairos 2 insists on one central principle. Faith cannot be neutral in the face of systematic injustice, and Christian theology must never be used to justify domination, exclusion, or the denial of another people's rights. It strongly challenges interpretation of Scripture used politically to legitimize oppression or supremacy, and insists that the Bible must be read through the lens of the vulnerable, with focus on justice, mercy, equality, and the dignity of every human being created in the image of God. The document named these reality without ambiguity. And I think this is one of the most important part in this document, that it talks in a very clear wording. Genocide in Gaza, silent genocide in the West Bank, settler colonialism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and forced displacement across historic Palestine. These are the names which have to be used. These are the vocabularies. It also speaks about Israeli policies of abduction, imprisonment, and the torture Palestinian prisoners face. Furthermore, it addresses Palestinians in Israel and the blatant structural racism and discrimination they encounter. It also addresses Palestinians in the diaspora, asking them to engage positively with their communities and play a role in the solidarity movement, as their voice is very important. It explicitly rejects the language of conflict or both sides, arguing that the reality is one of structural oppression by a foreign colonial regime. It's not a conflict. We are not in conflict of anyone. We are under occupation and apartheid and now genocide. The document also speaks about the hypocrisy of the Western world. Its hollow values, double standards, and how Palestinians have been sacrificed as unworthy people. Additionally, it discusses the deliberate targeting of Christian areas and communities, and echoes the heads of churches' statements on the systematic policy to empty the Holy Land of its Christians. And today, this policy is much clearer than any time before. What happens in the Christian communities, villages, and cities, I mean, it's very clear that the Christian community is targeted to put pressure on it, to push them to leave. Zionism is presented in the document as a settler colonial racist ideology, contradicting the core values of Christian faith. Christian Zionism is named as a theological distortion that promotes violence and supremacy. That said, this doesn't mean that the mainline churches' theological interpretation of the Bible is okay. We can see that there is a similar theological tendencies within some of these churches that justify the oppression of Palestinians. The document calls churches to repentance, accountability, and rejection, including boycott of such theology and theologians. We said it in the document very clearly. Sometimes we question, how can we share communion with such churches? We do not belong to the same church. The document also reaffirmed the creative resistance grounded in love and justice. In the first document, we call it loving resistance, creative resistance. Steadfastness, prayers, civil society action, legal struggle, cultural work, and nonviolent pressure, such as BDS, ending arms exports, prosecuting war criminals, defending international law, and ensuring reparations and the right of return should be understood as moral and faith-consistent tools. It also addresses the criminalization of the Palestinian resistance and also the criminalization of the global solidarity movement, as we witness now in many, in United States and also in many European countries, where the solidarity is being criminalized. We also reaffirm in the document the right of unoccupied people to resist by all legitimate means. It also sends sharp and decisive call to the global church and international community to commit a costly solidarity with the oppressed who live in costly steadfastness on their land, and to move beyond complicity expressed through silence, neutrality, or balanced language. They are called instead to speak truth to power as a serious responsibility, not just a slogan which many churches and theologians like to use, speaking truth to power, with such an empty understanding. Alongside its external critique, it speaks honestly and openly to the Palestinians themselves, to ourselves, calling for political renewal, unity, democratic leadership or democratic elected leadership, protection of social cohesion, and resistance to internal fragmentation, corruption, and despair, especially in the face of forced displacement and brain drain, as we witnessed right now. It also calls for comprehensive national re-evaluation of our reality, drawing lessons and insights that can lead to unified future collective vision and a clear strategy. And we should confess that this is what we really needs right now. Collective, clear vision and clear strategy for the future. The document also addresses church leaders in Palestine, commending their courage and tremendous work in Gaza and the West Bank, but also requesting them to bridge the gap between them and the believers. Today we witness more collaboration between churches and institutions and movements like Kairos and others. This internal self-critique we presented as an essential condition for liberation, as external justice must be accompanied by internal ethical responsibility, and this is our ethical responsibility. Kairos II places great emphasis on the leadership of Palestinian women and their role. Women are presented not as victims of war or bearers of suffering, but as partners in the struggle and foundational actors in the national resilience. Their role is described as central to the moral, social, and spiritual survival of Palestinian society, and their full participation in leadership is framed as essential to any future of justice. It also sends a direct, maybe emotional, but pastoral message to the Palestinian youth, acknowledging their anger, tiresome, fear, and temptation to leave the country in search of safety and opportunity, and calls them to remain agents of hope, not through naive optimism or wishful thinking, but through resilience and steadfast commitment to justice, to community, and to moral courage. Kairos II explicitly links the struggle for Palestinian rights with responsibility toward the environment. The document names what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank, the destruction of land, the water systems, the agriculture, and ecosystems as a form of ecocide, connecting the theology of justice with the theology of creation. This expands the Kairos vision beyond political rights toward a broader moral responsibility for the protection of life and earth itself. Importantly, Kairos II does not limit itself to describing the suffering. It also articulates a clear vision for the future. The document rejects religious states and supremacy-based models, political models, and instead articulates a vision of civil, democratic future grounded in equality, pluralism, full citizenship, and dignity for all. Peace in this vision is not the absence of violence or wars. It is the presence of justice, equality, accountability, and mutual human recognition. The document ends with a deeply theological hope rooted in resurrection, that life, not death, will have the final word. Kairos II sent calls and asked to churches, governments, and civil society worldwide, which my colleague, Reverend Munzer, will discuss. But to conclude, and sorry for the length of my presentation, Kairos II is not only a Palestinian document. It is a moral test addressed to the conscience of the global church and the international community. It asks whether faith will remain a language of ritual or become again a language of justice. It asks whether the world will treat Palestinian lives as equal in dignity and worth or not. And it asks whether hope can still be sustained, not as passive expectations, but as active commitment to truth, justice, and shared humanity. Kairos Document II therefore stands as both a warning and an invitation. A warning about the consequences of abandoning justice, the consequences of abandoning the Palestinians. No one can say that we did not know. And it's also an invitation to rediscover faith as a force for liberation, equality, and peace for all people of the land. And thank you.
Thank you, Rifat. That was so powerful. And such an excellent explanation of the Kairos Palestine II document, how it relates to the original document, and how much has changed since 2009, the current dire situation in Palestine, which made this new document a necessity. And thank you for making clear some of the most important points we need to identify in it. I really appreciate your unequivocal language that we saw in the document and that you reiterated about apartheid and genocide and about Christian Zionism and so many other things. And especially thank you for the passionate voice that you bring for so many others that don't have this chance to speak to us and to the worldwide church. Now we are going to hear from Rifat's colleague and a fellow leader in the Kairos Palestine movement. He is going to help us dive deeper into this challenging message and understand what it calls us to do. Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac is a Lutheran church pastor in Bethlehem, an author and a theologian. He is the director of the Bethlehem Institute of Peace and Justice, and he directs the highly acclaimed Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. He's a board member of Kairos Palestine, and in recent years, he has become a renowned international speaker, a powerful voice also for the Palestinian Christian community. He's published numerous works on issues related to the theology of the land, Palestinian Christians and Palestinian theology, holistic mission, and reconciliation. In December of 2023, Munther's nativity display, Christ in the Rubble, and the accompanying sermon had a global impact that is still being felt today. Welcome, Reverend Isaac.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to meet, even if virtually. Thank you for the United Methodist Kairos response for acknowledging our work, acknowledging our messages, and inviting us to elaborate more on the new Kairos document. And I'm going to just get into the topic, building on where my colleague Rifat ended, and precisely address the issue: what is Kairos Palestine II asking from the global community? What is this gathering of Palestinian Christian activists, theologians, lay leaders, clergy, who have deliberated for months and months? What are we asking the church? And I tried to summarize it into five simple or five kind of asks that we can actually address clearly. Number one is the use of language, and more precisely, calling things by their true name. It's way beyond time that Christians begin using the right description and speak truthfully about what's happening in Palestine. For years, we have endured the use of language such as conflict, the two sides of the story, the dual narrative, praying for peace, reconciliation, and so on. And for years, we argued that it's not fair to continue to demand from the oppressed to speak in a language that is appropriate to the ears of those who are enabling the oppressors. Kairos II emphasizes the importance of language. We talk clearly about talking or mentioning or naming genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism, Zionism as racism. And I know that for many of you, these things come across as too strong or maybe too aggressive. But what we have learned in the last 2 years is that refusing to name things by name is actually a form of racism. And let me explain why. Because when it comes to apartheid or genocide, and I would like to address what happened in Gaza, genocide is not a term that Palestinians invented, and surely we did not write the definition for what a genocide is and what a genocide is not. There is the Genocide Convention. There are clearly articulated criteria that defines what a genocide is and what a genocide is not. And over the last 2 years, scholars of genocide, UN bodies and UN mandated experts, several genocide scholars bodies, including the International Association of Genocide Scholars, passed an official resolution stating that Israel is committing genocide. The major international human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, Israeli human rights organizations, and as I said, numerous, hundreds of genocide scholars, including several Israeli genocide scholars, have said it's a genocide. The evidence is there. It's overwhelming. I don't know how people can deny that what Israel committed is a genocide. So the question becomes, why are churches avoiding the use of the language of genocide? That's the real question. And I have come to the conclusion that it can be only one of three. It's either that churches no longer believe in the international law and human rights and the value of organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and the value of UN bodies. So that's the first option. Churches no longer believe these are important and are fine with lawlessness. That's option one. And the problem is that no one have said so. Option two is that those who refrain from using the term genocide don't think that human rights apply on Palestinians, maybe because we're less humans. That's why I said it's racism. And that's why in the document we said we have the right to ask, how can one speak of Christian fellowship or communion while denying, supporting, justifying, or remaining silent about genocide, especially when such acts are committed in the name of God and Scripture? For that, we insist that any denial of reality is an evasion of manifest truth that reinforces injustice. And for that, we insist that we reject the concept of conflict. The reality on the ground is colonial, oppressive tyranny. And friends, let's be honest. This is a problem in most mainline churches. The language of conflicts, the language of two sides, the language that has led many churches to emphasize, for example, and say statements, Israel has the right to defend itself, but never give Palestinians the right to do anything. Mainline progressive churches justified this genocide. Let's remember this. So the first thing Kairos asks, you can no longer do with the old language of conflict, peace, and reconciliation. Name genocide a genocide. Call for accountability. If it's apartheid, we need sanctions. If it's conflict, you can hide behind this language and pray for peace, but it's not. The second thing that Kairos Palestine is openly clear about is addressing Zionism and Christian Zionism for what they are, as theologies and ideologies of racism, of supremacy, the concept of a God who is tribal, racist, a God of violence. Friends, it's way beyond time to have conversation about Christian Zionism. We think that when it is a theology of exceptionalism, we have to reject it. It's not applicable with the Christian values and faith. And we need to be clear how to judge Zionism and Christian Zionism by their fruits. Zionism, by definition, have always argued for and called for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Friends, just in the last few hours, we've heard Zionist leaders saying, we must make sure all Palestinians leave. What the early Zionists called transfer, or what the current Zionists call voluntary immigration, creating life circumstances through settler terrorism, through violence, through checkpoints that will push us out, are all part and parcel of the ideology of Zionism Christian Zionism supports that. Christian Zionism has been described in Kairos Palestine as a theological and moral corruption that calls for a tribal, racist god of war and ethnic cleansing. And in the document, we state that we are deeply shocked by the positions of many churches that adopted the colonizer's narrative or remain silent in the face of genocide. See, oftentimes when we talk about Christian Zionism, many in the West or many in Europe and in mainline churches think we are talking about maybe Southern Baptist or dispensationalist or the American right. But this war has clearly shown that the Christian Zionism of the liberal churches, of the progressive churches, is not that much better. It's even worse because it comes in the language of morality, just war, right to defend itself, the sacred duty to defend themselves, and so on. So it is now time to review all forms of theology, even post-Holocaust theology, and I know this is controversial, theologies that relate to exceptionalism, and to ask, how did we get to this moment? Kairos II insists that even silence in the face of genocide is complicity. Number 3, Kairos Palestine calls for reorienting Christian-Jewish dialogue, and we do so in bold and necessary way to do so. Of course, in the document itself, we insist that not every Jew is a Zionist, and not every Zionist is a Jew. This is crucial because it opens the door not for shallow dialogue, but for new alliances rooted in truth. Kairos II calls for building relationships with prophetic Jewish voices, those risking careers, communities, and security to oppose genocide and confront Zionism. So we make a clear demand. We therefore call in the document on the churches of the world to distinguish between dialogue with Jews and dialogue with Zionism. Indeed, to boycott dialogue with Zionist voices that have supported and continue to support occupation, apartheid, and the genocide of the Palestinian people. This is a major turning point, and let's be clear. Definitions such as the IHRA, documents such as combating hate, are presented as ways of combating anti-Semitism, whereas in reality, at their essence, they are Zionist documents. And as evident in the recent hearing on anti-Semitism in Washington, D.C. by the current US administration, it became a hearing to endorse and force Zionism. In fact, it was stated clearly that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, something we reject, something many Jews reject. But that's the irony. And churches need to step in by empowering the Jewish voices that oppose Zionism. Number 4, it was already mentioned, Kairos II renews the call for creative nonviolent resistance rooted in the logic of love. So I quote, "We reaffirm the right of all colonized people to resist, but we remain committed to creative resistance." And again, we name boycotting, divesting, and sanctions clearly. Effective forms of creative resistance, they are rooted in the logic of love and nonviolence. Friends, boycotting and asking for sanctions cannot be a debate anymore. It is a moral imperative. How can we accept normalizing genocide? And to be quite frank with you, the fact that right now, as we speak, Israel is still welcomed in the Olympics, that is part of why this genocide continues in Gaza and why settlers terrorize Palestinians and openly call for ethnic cleansing in Bethlehem and across the West Bank. For years, Israel has acted as a state above the international law. You know, we kept saying they kept pushing the boundaries, testing the limitations of the international community. How far can we go? How far can we go? Honestly, I don't think there are boundaries anymore. They committed a genocide and were not held accountable. What more do we expect? Calling for sanctions, arms embargo, also prosecution of war criminals and reparations are all important. And we call on churches to join us in calling for these. And let's extend this beyond the church. In the document we say we call upon all people of conscience, believers from every faith and persons of conviction to join us in creating grassroots alliances that engage in this creative resistance. As long as there are no accountability, as long as there is impunity, Israel will continue to do whatever it wants. The fifth call. And Kairos II renews a global call to sustain the Christian presence in the Holy Land, and of course, in a moment in which our own survival is at stake. We are facing existential threats. As we speak, Israel has begun building the settlement in Beit Sahur, the biggest Christian community now in the West Bank, and it's going to face a serious threat when this settlement cuts deep into the lands of Beit Sahur. This is a day we dreaded seeing for years, and now it's becoming a reality. And of course, if you try to do anything, you'll be immediately arrested, shot at by not the settlers, but the system that protects them. Speaking of the settlers, please stop treating them as if they are the problem. The problem is the system that enables them, the soldiers that protect them, the soldiers that arrest the Palestinian Christian family in Bir Zayt for defending their land from the settlers. That is the serious problem, the apartheid state of Israel. And today more than ever, Palestinian Christians are facing existential threat, accelerated attacks against us, whether in Jerusalem, targeting our priests, our holy sites, or whether in villages like Taiba, like Aboud, like Bir Zayt, or whether in the settlement in Beit Sahur, what's happening in the Armenian quarter. It seems now there is an intensified campaign to attack Palestinian Christians and also to delegitimize Palestinian Christians. We think now this is important. We renew our call for churches to stand in solidarity, to come and see, to challenge the siege imposed on the Christians of the Holy Land, as the document says. Come and visit the living stones. Help strengthen the steadfastness of the Palestinians and the Christian Palestinians among them. And so as our churches, our heads of churches, our communities, our organizations, our grassroots movements are struggling to survive, as Rifat said, just staying right now is resistance. We call you to walk alongside us. Come to Palestine not as pilgrims, but as accompaniers. It's time for costly solidarity. We even argue against all odds that we can still preserve the Christian presence in Gaza and advocate for the right of all who were displaced to return and rebuild. Israel has no problem opening the Rafah border one way. They don't want those who left to return. That is what we need to challenge. These are the calls: naming things, challenging Christian Zionism in all its forms, reforming Christian-Jewish dialogue or Christian-Zionist dialogue, creative nonviolent resistance, sustaining the Christian presence. These are the main calls. And in conclusion, I want to say this is a Kairos moment. A moment that demands truth, repentance, and costly discipleship. It was hard that we had to write another Kairos document because we thought Kairos 1 was enough. We even wondered ourselves, if they did not listen to Kairos 1, will they listen to Kairos 2? Not long ago, I met with church leaders from abroad who were visiting Palestine. And from the beginning, I chose not to begin with politeness. Instead, I opened with a question that clearly surprised them. I said, "Why are we here? Why are you asking for this meeting?" They were surprised because they said, "We're here to listen." And that's when I said, is this really why you're here? Because this is not your first visit, a second visit, third visit. You've been listening for years and doing nothing. Instead, you keep repeating the same rhetoric. It's a conflict, both sides suffer, let's pray for peace. And so as we write Kairos 2, I'm asking, are you really listening? Listening leads to accountability, to change and action. Friends, we're tired, not only of suffering, but of having to keep explaining our suffering again and again to churches that say they are listening while continuing the same old pattern. Kairos 2 asks for a response. It is a Kairos moment. This is why we say it's enough. This is a moment that requires repentance, clarity, bold action. It's a moment that demands costly solidarity. Costly solidarity. Because solidarity, by definition, is costly. For us to stay is costly. To rebuild is costly. To raise children in hope is costly. To cling to life in the face of death is costly. Yet we persist. And we ask you to join us in this moment in which we do whatever it takes to continue resisting evil with good. Kairos is about a decisive, God-given Kairos moment in which the global church must choose whether it will stand with life or with empire. So let us repent, speak truth, resist evil with good. Let us bear the cost, and let us stand together until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Thank you.
That was beautiful, Munther. Thank you so much. Thank you for making clear to us the language that makes some of us uncomfortable and that so many are resisting using. Thank you for calling out the apathy and the lack of courage we are seeing around us. Sometimes the racism that's causing that denial of truth that you identified, or the avoidance of naming it out loud, at least. We do need more. We need to hear more about the unjust theology of Christian Zionism, to be able to identify it in our own midst, in our church, where it does crop up, sometimes in not obvious ways, and when it comes out of the mouths of our government leaders. We have a lot of theological work to do in our churches, and I would invite all who are attending and who will be watching this video later to see UMKR's website for the Congregational Study Guide for the Kairos Palestine II document that's just been published this month. UMKR is also going to be working on something else you mentioned. They're promoting the kinds of solidarity visits that you described. So now we're going to shift our focus, and we're going to hear from United Methodist Church leaders who are bringing us their reflections on the Kairos Palestine II document and what Palestinian Christians are saying to the global church. They'll be speaking from their personal knowledge and experience in church leadership and in their regional contexts. So the first bishop we will hear from is Bishop Andy Emmanuel, speaking to us from Nigeria. Bishop Emmanuel has served in diverse ministerial roles in Nigeria. He was elected to the episcopacy in 2024, and he serves as bishop for 5 United Methodist conferences in Nigeria, as well as the mission districts of Senegal and Cameroon. He's been a consultant on congregational and community engagement for GBCS and has taught the social principles of the United Methodist Church widely in West African countries. Bishop Emmanuel envisions a mission-focused West Africa Central Conference, plans to prioritize clergy well-being, youth leadership development, and initiatives in evangelism, education, healthcare, and sustainability across West Africa. Welcome, Bishop Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I will have to apologize. I am here in Africa. There is not much light, so I am even inside my car as I talk to you right now, because there is shortage of power in many places here where I live. My name is Bishop Andy Emmanuel. As she rightly introduced me, I serve as the Bishop of the United Methodist Church in Nigeria. My episcopal area includes 5 annual conferences in Nigeria, a district in Cameroon, and in Senegal. I have been a United Methodist bishop for 1.5 years for now. And prior to my election, I have served many congregations. I have worked as consultant for General Board of Church and Society, working on many social justice issues. So I am glad that you have me in this Kairos 2 meeting. I am so delighted to hear these wonderful speakers and all that they have been saying regarding justice issues that relates to Palestinian Christians. For me, this is something very powerful. This is something very new. This is something that a lot of us from the African part of the world are still learning about it. When I sit here and listen to this speaker speak, my heart bleeds because of the violation of human rights that is going on around the world, and what is needed for us to do as people of faith, specifically as denominational leaders. But here is our challenge. Most of us that live in many parts of Africa, most especially in the northern part of Africa, are not even aware of these things that are going in Palestine. Many of people that I have led as a bishop taught that all Palestinians are Muslims and all Muslims are Palestinians. Many of them will be surprised to hear it for the first time. There are even Christians among the Palestinians. Why is this happening? Because the information and the whole idea of what is happening around the Middle East is not accessible to many of us that have lived in this part of the world. We have never taken pilgrimage to these places to see it firsthand what is going on there. We have never attended churches where our brothers of the Palestinian are to see their suffering. No firsthand information that is or eyewitness information that has happened among us, the African leaders. I have attended many of African College of Bishops meeting, other African Methodist meeting, AMC meeting. None of super majority of our leaders are not even aware of all these things. It is very important for us, for Kairos 2, as we move forward, to strategize upon the information and educational piece of this reality, to give us, the leaders in Africa, the first-hand information and witness to the plight and the cry of the Palestinian Christian and the Palestinian people as well. Because this is something that is completely out of the view of many of Christian leaders here in northern part of Africa, particularly in northern part of Nigeria. Secondly, there is this issue of Islamophobia that is so strong among many people in the northern part of Nigeria and many northern countries because of what Christians have seen happening in Muslim-dominated areas where many of them are subject to persecution and they're not allowed to worship in their own churches and they are not allowed to do things that religious freedom requires them to do. So that has also contributed to blocking accessible information and reality of things that are happening on ground. So I am very delighted to be part of this conversation, and I have taken a lot of notes, and I'm looking forward to see how this can be translated into the work I am doing among the African College of Bishops here in Africa and the Methodist Council in Africa as well. We will, as much as possible, like to partner with Kairos 2 movement to ensure that this vital and important information about what is happening in the Palestinian territory is made available for us to get this first-hand information and inform the Christian community about the suffering of these innocent people. So I am so delighted and I am glad. This is a learning experience for me, and I look forward to learn more as we progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Emmanuel. I really appreciate you finding a way to be with us in spite of the electricity problems you're having right now in your area. And thank you for explaining the lack of knowledge that you have sensed in your area about the current situation in Palestine and the lack of awareness that there are Christians in Palestine. I think that is true in many places throughout our denomination and in other churches. People are not nearly aware enough of the Palestinian Christian community, and that is a big part of our job to make them aware.
Thank you.
And your willingness to partner with others in Africa and throughout the church in addressing the issues of Kairos Palestine II is very welcome. So now we are going to move to your colleague in the Philippines, Bishop Francisco, who will share with us his response to Kairos Palestine II. I should mention that he is joining us, as I just said, from the Philippines, where the starting time for this webinar was 2 a.m. And it was because of how much he cares about this subject and the Palestinian people that he was willing to be with us at this highly irregular and uncomfortable hour. So Bishop Ciriaco Francisco was the resident bishop of the Manila Episcopal area in the Philippine Central Conference of the United Methodist Church. He previously served the Davao Episcopal area after his election to the episcopacy in 2012. He also has served in the past, as president of the College of Bishops of the Philippine Central Conference, chairperson of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, and vice chair of our church's connectional table. Currently, he is the general secretary of the Ecumenical Bishops Forum in the Philippines. Established in 1984, the Forum is a fellowship of bishops from the mainline Protestant churches and the Roman Catholic Church, advocating for human rights, justice, and peace. Welcome, Bishop Francisco.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm delighted to join this virtual conversation. It's already 3 o'clock in the morning here in the Philippines, and I'm so excited to listen and share some of our thoughts here in relation to Kairos Palestine II. Let me share my thought by using a jeepney hermeneutics perspective. You know, jeepney in the Philippines was introduced by the US military forces in the World War II, and it became a Filipino public utility jeepney, the mass means of transportation in the Philippines. Jeeps are swords for the US military. Jeepneys are plowshares. Jeepney hermeneutics begins inside the vehicle. In the Filipino language, it means sa loob, inside. With the voices of the ordinary people, the 70% in the Philippines. Kairos Palestine II is exactly that, a cry from the ground, spoken by the Palestinian living under occupation. It is not abstract theology, but the testimony of bodies, neighborhoods, and daily survival. It is theology birthed from under the rubble. It is a call to see what is usually overlooked. Those who ride jeepneys notice what others ignore, like vendors of all kinds, traffic enforcers, also of all kinds, and children knocking on the windows or coming up the jeepney to shine shoes for a small charge. Kairos Palestine II insists that the world must see and live reality of apartheid, occupation, displacement, systemic violence, genocide, not as headlines, but as human stories. It demands readers to refuse sanitized narratives and instead look directly at the suffering people. It is a call for a theology of kapwa or solidarity. Jeepney hermeneutics emphasize kapwa, fellow, shared humanity in crowded spaces. Kairos Palestine II echoes this by framing liberation as collective, not individual. It calls global Christians to recognize Palestinians as kapwa, as sisters and brothers, not distant others, and to stand with them through nonviolence resistance, advocacy, and economic pressures. It is a call to read the scripture from the back seat of the jeepney, not the balcony. Jeepney hermeneutics reminds us that scripture sounds different when read from the margins. Kairos Palestine II reads the Bible from the perspective of the oppressed people of the land, identifying with Jesus, the colonized Jew, not with the empire that crucified him. It challenges Christians to reject theological frameworks that celebrate superiority and bless denomination. It is a prophetic stop signal. In a jeepney, anyone can shout "para" to stop the ride. Kairos Palestine II is a global "para," a demand to halt the sin of complicity, silence, and neutrality. It urges churches to stop the ride of injustice and apathy by naming oppression clearly and acting decisively, and doing all of this now. It is hope as shared destination. Jeepney hermeneutics imagines liberation as a communal journey. Kairos Palestine II ends not in despair, but in stubborn hope. A hope rooted in justice, dignity, accompaniment, solidarity, and the belief that liberation is coming for the Palestinian people. In the document, Kairos Palestine II, 2.8 on the Palestinian women, emphasize on how empire attacks women and children. This has been the history of the Filipino people. Children and victims of imperialism and global capitalism. The victimization of children is always a component of imperialist agenda and tyrannical rule. Our sacred texts narrate the malevolence of rulers, even upon innocent children. We know that two narratives are familiar to us: the massacre of the innocents by Herod the Great, king of Judea, which was an order to kill all male children 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem, in the Gospel of Matthew, and the order of King of Egypt to kill all the males born Hebrew women during childbirth in Exodus 1. Even the killing of every firstborn son of Egypt to serve as signs and marvels, so that Yahweh can be known to the Pharaoh of Egypt, exhibits the depravity done to children. In Philippine history, Manila Massacre, or the rape of Manila in 1945, during the Battle of Manila between American and Japanese forces, is one of the major war crimes of the Imperial Japanese Army against Filipino civilians. 100,000 is the number of people estimated to have been killed from February 3 to March 3, but 500,000 are believed to have died as a result of that massacre. In the Yamashita war crime trial, one of the testimonies given was about the rounding up of 400 women and girls from Manila's wealthy. From this number, 25 were chosen as the most beautiful. They were taken to Bayview Hotel, the rape center, and the Japanese enlisted men and officers took turns raping them. Many of them were 12 to 14 years old. The Philippines has a long history of colonization and occupation. 300 years under Spain, 100 years under America, and 3 years under the Japanese. However, despite the yearly celebration of Philippine Independence Day every June 12, our nation remains enslaved, our women prostituted, and children sacrificed in the altar of globalization, capitalism, and imperialism. Every day before the pandemic, as many as 5,000 women and men leave the Philippines to work in jobs tantamount to slavery. Filipino women and girls are exported as brides and become victims of forced labor and sex trafficking, not just in foreign lands, but also locally through sex tourism. There are already reports on the abuse and rape in Palestinian women. Perhaps it is also necessary to name patriarchy, this ideology of male dominance, as anti-life and against the will of God. Cynicism is promoted and sustained by male leaders, Netanyahu, Trump, and many other leaders. We in the Philippines, in January 30, 2026, we had an online conversation after the Kairos Palestine II conference. We requested Dr. Isaac to speak to us, and we made a commitment to see how we can journey together with the Palestinians in their suffering. And it is our commitment to support the cause of freedom in Palestine. Thank you, and may this conversation continue to guide us so that we can work together as people of God. God bless.
Thank you so much, Bishop, for that in-depth and truly profound response of solidarity with our Christian brothers and sisters in Palestine. And thank you for those powerful connections you made with the struggles of Filipinos in the past and currently. And I really appreciated your focus on Christian theology that spotlights the oppressed and includes a message of hope and liberation, which we must always keep before us. Friends, we are now going to hear from one more United Methodist bishop speaking now from the United States, and that is Bishop Julius Trimble, who is the General Secretary of the United Methodist General Board of Church and Society. He oversees the agency's vision, mission, and mandate for witness and action on issues of human well-being, justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. He leads the agency in responding to critical social issues, including legislative advocacy in the U.S. government. In collaboration with ecumenical and interfaith partners, Bishop Trimble also guides GBCS in advocating for international priorities with various government and non-governmental entities at the Church Center for the United Nations in New York City. After his election to the episcopacy in 2008, Bishop Trimble served 8 years as resident bishop of the Iowa Annual Conference, and beginning in 2016, he served for 8 years as bishop of the Indiana Annual Conference. Welcome, Bishop Trimble.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Rifat Kassis and Dr. Isaac. Thank you for this opportunity to once again declare a pronounced support for the voice of Christians and United Methodists in particular, to stand in solidarity with Palestinian Christians in the struggle against decades of settler colonialism, oppressive apartheid, and the struggle for a just peace in the face of genocide. Peace is not the absence of all pain, and we would not seek to debate that, but it is the presence of justice, where the dignity and sacred worth of all people who live on the lands that many of us call Holy Land is not sacrificed on the altar of violence and military might as an arbiter for a future that God can smile upon. The General Board of Church and Society of the United Methodist Church, in adherence to the social principles of the United Methodist Church, and more importantly, the Bible, we believe that faith must always be linked with justice. We stand in solidarity with the Kairos II document. We stand with Palestinian Christians in their call for a theology of resistance and the unrelenting commitment to a hope-filled future. In light of the profound truths that we received in the beginning of this conversation, I know that the resolutions that were reaffirmed and adopted at the last General Conference of the United Methodist Church related to United Methodist and opposition to Israeli settlements in the Palestinian land must be now reviewed and changed in light of Kairos II document. The church is called to heed our resolutions, opposition to Israeli settlements in Palestinian land. We urge United Methodists to read about, this is how the last one read, in 4108 and 4109 of the resolutions, read about suffering of Israelis and Palestinians and the pursuit of nonviolent ways to end what should say genocide, what did say conflict. Thank you, because the truth is that religious liberty is being restricted, and all the more reason that we must invite a wide exposure to the Kairos II document that lifts our belief in a good and just God, love that is transformative, and a hope that is first faith in God, and also a commitment not to give into the evil that exists while working for a better future. As the General Board of Church and Society is dedicated to the work of living faith, seeking justice, and pursuing peace, we communicate with policymakers, leaders, and ministry partners around the world with the mission of actually transforming the world. We believe that we are called to be ambassadors of signs of hope, but unapologetic about the elevation of human rights. How does this happen in real time, in real places, sometimes in frustrating ways? Most recently, Congresswoman Betty McCollum of Minnesota reintroduced again the Defending the Human Rights of Palestinian Children and Families Living Under Israeli Military Occupation Act. This legislation, introduced by Congressman Betty McCollum, would promote human rights, peace, and justice for Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. It would demand that no U.S. tax dollars be used for military detention, abuse, or ill treatment, or this is the big piece that we really need to advocate for, is any violation of international humanitarian law that has consistently happened over decades. I urge everyone on this webinar to learn from the Kairos II document and engage not only in education and prayerful support, but pushing forward at us to live into it, not only with honest conversation, but fervent commitment. For over 4 decades of leadership roles in the United Methodist Church, I have advocated for children and their right to grow and thrive, and that we, the church, must protect children. I've done this consistently in my ministry long before becoming a bishop or joining the General Board of Church and Society. It pains me, it's embarrassing that as many as 20,000 children have been killed in Gaza, and this has not been on the front of headlines, or people are not in the streets here in the US and other places saying this is totally unacceptable. This eliminates any conversation at all that there is no such thing as genocide that has already been happening for some time. Please see our action alerts, meaning the General Board of Church and Society, on peace with justice, including on a just peace in the Holy Land, if you go to umcjustice.org. This is what I heard said to our leaders who opened our webinar today. Faith demands that Christians do much more than simply go to church. We cannot transform the world, friends, by simply going to church, but we can transform the world in solidarity with our Palestinian siblings by being the church, by being the church. No one can say that we did not know what is happening and what has been happening in Palestine. To the sons and daughters of the First Church, I say thank you for calling us to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God, and to speak truth to power. Thank you so very much.
God bless you, Bishop Trimble, for that powerful message, that call to action. Thank you for naming the reality of genocide and apartheid that Kairos Palestine and our speakers today have called for us to do. And I so appreciated you reaffirming the commitment of our church to take meaningful action in response to Kairos Palestine II. As you said, it changes everything, this document, and we do need to look again now at the statements and the commitments we've made in the past to see what more needs to be done. And I know UMKR looks forward to working with GBCS and other agencies and leaders throughout the church, including in Asia and Africa and Europe, to bring to all of our church that awareness that is so badly needed. Friends, we're getting very close to the time we had set, and I think we're going to go at least 15 minutes beyond the 90 minutes that we told you. We have another speaker to hear from on behalf of UMKR, and at least a tiny bit of discussion among our whole panel about one crucial question. So before we get to that panel discussion, we are going now to hear from a co-chair of United Methodist for Kairos Response Steering Committee, Carol Ekdahl Garwood. She's also the chair of UMKR's Tourism Committee. She's the chairperson of the Holy Land Task Force in the United Methodist Church's Great Plains Conference, where she also serves on the board of ordained ministry. She's a member of the Nebraskans for Peace Palestinian Rights Task Force. Carol's first trip to Palestine, Israel was in 2011, and in recent years, she has helped to organize and lead numerous solidarity trips to the region. She was previously a member of the Mercy and Justice team in the Great Plains Conference, and she has supported justice advocacy in the church and civil society for decades. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I appreciate that. And what I'm going to be speaking about is what UMKR's response to the Kairos Palestine II document will be. And I'm sure that we've got some people that are still with us today who aren't United Methodists. So what I would do would be to ask you to contemplate joining us in these actions in whatever context you are a part of. Authors of the Kairos Palestine II document have initiated a major turning point in the Palestinian Christian struggle, with an urgent call to Christians around the world to engage in costly solidarity. Since the release of the document in November of 2025, UMKR has been distributing the document throughout our church and has joined in an ecumenical effort to create a study guide that can be used to provide more education about the document and what it is calling us to do. Over the years, United Methodists have done many things to stand in solidarity with our Palestinian siblings. Over the last 2 decades, our General Conference has adopted policies to oppose the Israeli occupation and all crimes associated with it. A call for all nations to boycott the Israeli settlements, a call for divestment of Israeli bonds, to set standards for responsible tourism in Palestine, defend Palestinian children's rights, and demand our right to boycott injustice. Our church has also taken groundbreaking divestment actions in 2014 and 2016, including divesting from Israeli banks that support the Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory. Our General Board of Church and Society has mobilized United Methodists in political advocacy with U.S. officials, and United Methodists have joined several successful boycotts of companies that are profiting from Israel's apartheid regime. For 16 years, this grassroots movement, UMKR, has been organizing education and justice advocacy throughout the denomination. We have a website that is full of educational materials, recommended reading, recommended videos, and much more. However, as Kairos Palestine II makes clear to us, the situation in Palestine, Israel has become extremely urgent. We need to do more, and we should demand more of ourselves. It's time to speak loudly. Name the fact that Israel is an apartheid state and that they are committing genocide. Use that language. We would like to hear United Methodist Church leaders state unequivocally what the world has seen, live streamed, and knows very well: the fact that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. For a church to stand up and say that is extremely valuable. Our church leaders' voices carry weight with all our millions of members and with society and government leaders. Accountability for this genocide is crucial, and it must not be swept under the rug to be ignored. The settler violence, confiscation of Palestinian land, and expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank must also be condemned. It is time for the United Methodist Church to call for full divestment from Israeli occupation and apartheid, and to apply the divestment to all of the church's investment portfolio. Currently, there's one option, the Social Values Fund, which eliminates some of the most notable companies of concern. The Social Values Fund consistently ranks among the highest returns on investment of any church's pension funds, but one single fund is not good enough. Not when our other investment funds include those same companies that profit from and support this apartheid regime. Our General Conference has spoken on this for over 20 years, calling for the world's financial support for the Israeli settlements and occupation to stop. It is time that the United Methodist Church applies its Christian values to all our investments. Complete divestment, full stop. It's also time for all United Methodist tourism in Palestine to be engaged in responsible tourism. We would like to see a clear commitment from all United Methodists that will visit Palestine, Israel, to do better than to walk where Jesus walked. We are called to walk as Jesus walked. Walk with the suffering, the oppressed, the despairing. To do that is to spend time with our Christian siblings in Palestine. Learn the frightening reality of life for God's children living there today, and learn what is needed to reach the day of a just peace. When we return home, we also need to do something with that knowledge. Take some steps, large or small, to support justice advocacy in the United Methodist Church. It's time for a lot more learning and united action. As I mentioned earlier, this month, UMKR has published a congregational study guide on this remarkable document we've been discussing today. It was produced with partners in the Presbyterian Church and in the ecumenical organization Friends of Sabeel North America, or FOSNA. See the link for the study guide in the chat. It can also be found easily on our website homepage. Now is the time for United Methodists to commit to learning and action in our congregations and in annual conferences. We hope to see hundreds of study and action groups arising throughout the denomination. United Methodists who will engage in learning the truth about Palestine and then take steps on what they've learned, doing something to achieve liberation and reconciliation for all the people of the Holy Land. We call for United Methodists to connect with UMKR, the UMC movement for Palestine, and to join thousands in coordinated action. We are seeking to build a mighty church movement for justice in Palestine, a movement that draws on our Wesleyan legacy to bring a powerful Christian voice, a voice with moral authority, into the political arena and throughout our society. I'll end with a paraphrase of John Wesley's exhortation to the church. No less than this is needed to respond to the escalating catastrophe in Palestine today. We must do all the good we can, by all the means we can, in all the ways we can, in all the places we can, at all the times we can, to all the people we can, as long as ever we can. Thank you.
Amen and amen. Thank you, Carol, for that call to action on behalf of UMKR. I hope that it resonated with many today. I believe that it did. And we have been going over time, as you all can see. I would like to ask the one question that was intended for our panel discussion and ask each of our panelists. And Bridget, I will ask you if we can all be on the screen together, all of those who spoke today. And I would like to ask each of you for a short, succinct answer to this. what is the primary thing that you would like to see done now in response to the Kairos Palestine document? A single thing, which is difficult to name, I'm sure. What is the first thing that comes to your mind, or the most important thing that comes to your mind, that the church or we as individual Christians should do now in response to the call of Kairos Palestine? And I'm sure Bridget is working on getting us all on the screen together. I'm going to ask our Palestinian brothers first to answer that question. I know there are many, many things you could name. If you can name one single thing that is paramount in your mind, that would be great.
Let me go first, then Munther, yeah? Because I really need to leave you after I speak, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I think there are many things which we can do as individuals or as churches or as institutions, civil society, etc. But I will emphasize some ideas for individuals to do, because most of the time we are faced with this question: what can we do? We are little, we are just individuals, but I think there are many good things can be done. For instance, if we as individual review our personal financial and consumption practices, for instance, and support initiatives aligned with international law, nothing less than international law and nothing more than international law, and human rights, definitely. Engage responsibly with campaigns such as BDS as a moral, not punitive instrument. So something like this, advocacy, right to church bodies, for instance, to the synods and global partners, requesting clarity of position, confront. I mean, not to let anything written or spoken about Palestinians without challenging them and confronting them with the reality on the ground. Engage with policymakers and embassies. There are many things which we can done as individuals. And my last point, also for individuals, we say it in Arabic: protect the narrative. نحمي روايتنا. Protect the narrative. Challenge false equivalence narratives that erase power asymmetry. Amplify Palestinian Christian voices in global forums. Try to contribute in articles, lectures, and webinars to protect our narrative, because, as I said earlier in my presentation, today we are facing really existential threat, not just our physical presence, but also our narrative, our memory, and our continuity in this land. I would like just to take the chance while the floor is with me to thank you for this kind invitation and for this wonderful audience. And I hope to see you soon in Palestine, or some of you. Thank you again, and I apologize because I really have to leave you now. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Understood. Thank you, Rifat, and thank you for staying for so long. It was very good seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Munther, I'm going to give you the option of speaking now or being the last one to speak. Which would you
I'll
like?
speak last if that's okay. All right, let's hear.
All right. Bishop Francisco, your thoughts on what, and it can be one single thing if possible, or whatever is on your heart about how we must respond now to Kairos Palestine II.
Yeah, thank you. We have been very occupied in responding to the issues of justice and peace. But I must admit that we are very much occupied here in the local situation, because in the Philippines we are having so many challenges in terms of peace and justice. And our church, and even the organization where I am the general secretary, we focus so much on local scenario or experiences. But after reading the document and hearing Dr. Isaac and Rifat, I saw the need for us Filipinos, especially the United Methodist Church, to conduct studies because that's not so familiar with us. I think that's one of the commitment we made in January 30 conversation, that we will cascade that document to the local setting, to our people, to the churches, and that's our commitment.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I can't think of a better commitment for the how to respond now. And as you heard, I hope, and saw in the chat, we have on our website an ecumenical study guide developed by 3 Christian organizations, including UMKR. So if anyone wants to find that, go to our homepage, kairosresponse.org, and it will be easy to spot there. And it is a profound and very in-depth study guide with a lot of background information that will help beginners understand the situation. So we'd love to hear how that goes, Bishop, in the Philippines, and work with you on expanding that. I will mention to you all that Bishop Andy Emanuel wasn't able to stay with us any longer, but we're very grateful that he was here for the time he managed. And now, Bishop Trimble, what would be your top priority for how we should respond to Kairos Palestine II?
Again, thank you. I really appreciated Dr. Isaac and Rifat as well. And I think really 2 things I would say. One is we really need to engage the truth about Zionism. And I think a lot of our pastors and even some of our theologians have been, co-opted in an understanding that somehow there's a way for some people to really defend quote unquote Christian Zionism. And to me, it's like that's like Christian nationalism. It's a contradiction in terms almost. So that was very helpful. I think we really want to push people to actually read the Kairos II document, and particularly those who have speaking, preaching roles, to be not only familiar with the document, but then understand how it can provide guidance. I also would say that people have an opportunity to support things like Block the Bombs to Israel, a legislative action that several congresspersons have signed on. Since the beginning of Israel's genocide against Palestinians in Gaza in 2023, the U.S. has given more than $30 billion in taxpayer-funded weapons to Israel. It's not only complicit in Israel's killing of more than 65,000 Palestinians, but our weapons and our tax-supported weapons make us complicit in international crime. So on June 5th, this goes back a ways, but Representative Delia Ramirez, a United Methodist, along with others, introduced this historic bill in Congress. And it still has possibility of going forward if there more people knew about it and more congresspersons signed on to support HR 3565, Block the Bombs Act. So I think those of us who are U.S. citizens and taxpayers can say, we don't want our tax dollars in any way, shape, or form supporting the continued ongoing genocide and death to Palestinians. And that's something we can do something about. An individual can do that by reaching out to their elected official. So I'll say that both being familiar with the Kairos II document, standing firmly against Zionism and the distortion that you can't speak out without being considered anti-Semitic and so forth. But also Block the Bombs Act.
Thank you very much, Bishop. That's wonderful. And I put a link in the chat for the Block the Bombs Act. We have an ongoing action alert or action to contact Congress in support of that act. So if people want to take action on that, you can do that in a minute by clicking that link in the chat. And it's also on our homepage. And UMKR continues to send out alerts for congressional advocacy and other ways of doing political advocacy in the US, and sometimes for our supporters around the world. We have other actions that people can do even if they're not in the US. All right, finally, we come to Reverend Dr. Munther Itzhak again. And Munther, will you close us with your words of the actions, the primary action or actions you would call us to do?
Yeah, I'm grateful for the responses offered. In my talk, I tried to offer, things that can be done, whether language, Zionism, on a denominational level, on congregational level. And I want to just say it's important to work both on, things like Block the Bomb Act and political lobbying. These are important. The voice of the church must be heard over and over, joining coalitions. But at the same time, we must remember that the church, at the end of the day, is community, grassroots. So my challenge to all of us who stayed in this call is, how do we take this conversation to our congregations? How do we make sure this becomes a local conversation, not just a conversation on the level of denominational structures? And I think that can be done. Everyone can insist, whether you are a pastor attending or part of the ministry council or a member, how can we have a conversation, especially now that there are guides to that? And how then do we follow and implement? The calls in Kairos are clear, and every congregation can choose which one to follow, which direction to go, whether it's economical sanctions or whether it's education. There are things that can be done. And I hope that the actions are considered prayerfully in a spirit of prayer at the congregational level, at small groups. And then from there, we multiply.
Wonderful. That's a great summary. Thank you. Thank you, Munther. I'll point out also that we heard quite a few specific calls to action from Carol, the things that UMKR will be calling for and working for in our denomination. So all of you will be hearing more about those actions from us. And among all of us, we've raised some quite challenging actions for ourselves in our church. And I know that many of us are eager to move forward on those, and we look forward to working with you. I want to thank everyone on the panel for taking the time to be here, especially even longer than you were asked, that you committed to, and in particular for those who came at such an inconvenient time. We really appreciate that. Your knowledge, your insights, the depth of what your thoughts that you have shared there have been very valuable today, and I believe this recording is going to be a useful tool for information and enlightening people in our church for a long time to come. We aren't going to have time for any Q&A, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry about that for our listeners. And we hope you'll come back and be with us again. And now, Bridget, I'm going to turn this over to you to close us out.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar in the coming days, so they'll be posted on our YouTube pages. And if you have signed up for our email list, they'll also be shared in that way. So if you haven't signed up for those, really encourage you to sign up for those. But they should be up before the end of the week, so you can check our YouTube channels for that. And also be on the lookout for information on our next webinar. We do this fairly regularly. We have this amazing and wonderful community, and we're just very glad that you're a part of it. UMKR Assembly is going to be, all right, correct me if I'm wrong, May 1st to 3rd in Washington, D.C. There will be a save the date that will come out soon. Also be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, the panelists are still. Are you still on your?